I think that the Sugar Hill Sector Plan, juxtaposed against where we are in the history of restoration and this opportunity and imperative to get land for water storage, is one of the most crucial moments that I've seen in my career, which started in 1986 here in Florida. It encapsulates everything that we have tried to do as a state, and it pits the modern legal tools and modern science and modern economics versus the old political and economic structure and way of doing things. We have a multi-billion-dollar restoration plan, the need for it, because of the way we did development in Florida for so many decades. We have a land use planning law, which still exists and is still pretty strong, even though it was weakened pretty well in 2011. We have that law because of the way we made land use planning, development, and transportation decisions. We meant to change that in a major way. And so when you look at the issues we're facing now, we have the final missing piece, big picture missing piece of Everglades restoration, the water storage imperative south of Lake Okeechobee. And as we're debating how, when we're going to do that, along comes this major development proposal right in that same general area. Advocated for, touted in a way reminiscent of all that stuff that happened all those decades ago. More development, more people will come, it'll be great for the economy. So we stand at this place where the state administration, the current administration running the state, may well be faced with a choice. Do we do the things we know we need to do, clearly, unambiguously, or which we know is what most of the 8 million people in South Florida require for their future? Or do we make the exact same kind of decision that we made that got us here in the first place yet again? That's where we stand. And the state may have an important decision to make at the beginning of next year. The idea is this sector plan proposal. A sector plan is a fancy name for your general land use comprehensive plan amendment. The idea of comprehensive planning as it instituted in 1985, as it remains in Florida law today, is this idea of you make decisions based on actual data, actual science, actual engineering facts. You take a look at the future and the existing scenario of an area. What's its environmental sensitivity? What's its drainage patterns? Where's water going to come from? Where are the roads? How much land do we need to meet our realistic economic and population growth needs? And you compare all that and you make, under the terms of the law, the best, most appropriate land use decision for that particular piece of land. We authorized these specific animals called sector plans a few years ago, the benefit of which, the purpose of which, was to apply to large rural areas. And we have one here, obviously. And the idea of a sector plan was to take advantage of this large piece of ownership and take that advantage by securing for the public, in exchange for pretty significantly increased development rights, approvals. They're actually not rights, potential rights. In exchange for that, secure large swaths, big, large, permanent areas for protection and restoration of natural resources. That was the concept, that in exchange for what are clearly legally gratuitous increases in development potential for landowners, the other side of that coin is, because of the impact on the other side of that, they would grant permanent, large, adequate, meaningful areas for permanent protection. And the one thing that's the most significant change for sector plans compared to other general land use plans is that we wouldn't hold them to a demonstrated need over the next 5 or 10 years, even though we do not need more commercial or more residential or whatever development in that location. Because of what we're trying to achieve, these big picture ecological protection and restoration things, we won't hold you to a demonstration of need. But other than that, all the other basic planning requirements apply. There's got to be science, there's got to be engineering. You have to write plans that make sense, that are coherent, that are clear, that are specific, that are meaningful. The challenge of these things, and this is still kind of at the beginning. We have a few sector plans approved in the state. But we don't have a great long-term track record. The challenge of these things is that, are we going to approve sector plans in a manner that clearly grants potential development rights to landowners, but those protections on the other side, those long-term permanent protections for regional ecosystems, are vague, are iffy, are inadequate, are not what the science tells us we need, but are instead what the landowner was willing to give us that was left over after they got done planning their development. That is the challenge of sector plans. So into that backdrop comes the proposed Sugar Hill Sector Plan. The United States Sugar Corporation, the Hilliard Brothers, proposed a plan amendment, land use plan amendment to Hendry County. I'm sorry?
Okay, so...
I'm sorry if you can't read it.
Yeah, because I can't read, so you're going to take a little extra time, I think, to read what's there, because the print is really tiny.
All right, very good, very good.
Richard, put the
Then,
mic up a little bit.
all right. What else you got to do? All right. Water? Jacket match the shirt? All right. The proposal to combine landowners, up to 18,000 homes, up to 25 million square feet of commercial development. The piece of earth is 67 square miles. That is an enormous piece of land. That is an amazingly great amount of residential, commercial, and related development. It would be spread out over a number of different land use categories: employment center, long-term agriculture, mixed-use urban, mixed-use suburban, rural estates, and natural resource management, I put with a question mark. These are the land use categories that I just rattled off, the colored areas. As you can see, it's not a contiguous parcel of land, it's spread out. The planning documents in the proposal do not explain why the land is spread out. It does not explain the relationship from one parcel of land. Data to completely ignore the mega issue there, in addition to the lack of drainage and the public safety and water scarcity, was just not professionally acceptable. It was off the charts, and the state agency comments adequately and very accurately reflected those objections and those basic fundamental problems with the sector plan. The state recently gave the county an extension of time until the very end of this year in order to move forward or not with that sector plan. And as I speak in front of you, I do not know if the landowners are seriously attempting to pursue that project, or whether the county will agree that it's good for the county to do so. That will remain to be seen. And if they do ultimately adopt this plan by the end of this year, that will be a major test for the state's administration. We tend to see in the history of these things often strong state objections. We haven't seen that in 3 years, 4 years now, but even in the past history of land use planning, you often will see strong state objections and then some minor tweaks and changes to the plan, and then the state say, oh, that did it. that will be what we look for. That's the big challenge here, in my opinion. The planning deficiencies, the planning challenges, the basic facts about the location, the geography of this parcel of land are overwhelming problems for this land use amendment. I cannot see how, no matter how it might be dressed up, this sector plan could ever be seen as complying with state's land use planning process, the sector planning requirements. That is my very strong opinion for a lot of the reasons that you see listed here, including the really vague planning, the planning standards, the development standards that were written into the sector plan. When you looked at it for how is this going to happen, how will things that need to be protected? How will specific decisions be made about development on such a massive area? It was bewildering to read how vague the language was. And that leads me to the economic argument, because the argument made in support of this is the same economic argument that we have been reading for a century in this state. Open up more land for development, people will come, they will create economic activity and jobs. And we've learned a lot about how real development economics works. And that notion, just open it up for development and we'll all be better off, has been discredited for a very long time now. Economic development and modern economic development science is about targeting specific industries, targeting specific pieces of land that make sense for that industry because of the characteristics of it. We go after that, we create what we need, and that's how you do it. Just opening up 40-some thousand acres of development with vague development standards, with no specific projects in mind, except perhaps some idea of complementary development related to the airport there, which doesn't need anything in the same amount of zeros anywhere close to 46,000 acres of land. There's no economic development projects. There's nothing on the table specifically. Under our land use planning law, where there's a specific economic development project that makes sense, you can adopt a specific land use amendment for that project, site specific, and you do it right, and it doesn't take that long. The idea of a sector plan is it grants 50-year-long potential development rights. 50-year-long, meaning any development that's approved there could get pulled a permit for tomorrow, or it might not happen over the next 50 years. It's extremely vague. It is extremely speculative that it will create any meaningful amount of economic development.